Welcome to XYPN Radio, where your host Alan Moore brings you into a community of fee-only financial planners who want to profitably and successfully serve Gen X and Gen Y clients. If you're ready to get the knowledge you need from leaders in your field, learn from forward-thinking advisors, and take action on your own goals, XYPN Radio is the show for you. Here's your host.
Hello and welcome to this episode of XYPN Radio. I'm your host, Alan Moore, and today I'm excited to have Cristina, an early member of XY Planning Network and founder of Future Financial Planning, a fee-only financial planning firm in Brooklyn, New York, on the show today. Cristina got her MBA and started working at an investment management firm before realizing that she really wanted to be on the financial planning side of the business. So she started her CFP program and launched her own firm back in 2007. She talks about the struggle of starting a firm with limited experience and just not knowing all the how to run a business part of the venture. After a couple of years, she ended up closing down her firm and took a job with a comprehensive financial planning firm. But a couple years in, the job ended up ramping down since the firm moved locations and working virtually wasn't an option. She mentioned during the episode that she actually would have stayed at that firm and probably not started her own firm anytime soon, but she ultimately decided to do so at the end of 2014 and has been building it ever since. She keeps her expenses very low, meets with clients in their home so she doesn't have to have an office space, and does a lot more project-based planning than retainer, which was really cool to hear about. At the end of the episode, we talked about her other venture as an investor in a local bar. So she actually has some great insights on the similarities between financial planning and wine, which I thought was really fantastic. You can find any of the additional resources that we mentioned during the episode at xyplanningnetwork.com/112. Be sure to go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP to join our private group just for XYPN Radio listeners. It's the community of advisors we've all been looking for that's there to provide support when we need it the most. Best of all, it's free. I encourage you to check it out at xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP. Without further ado, here's my interview with Cristina. Hey, Cristina, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for being on.
Thanks for having me, Alan.
So I'm really excited because you have, it sounds to me like you've had sort of an awesome start of your business there in New York, and also have a couple other cool ventures that I'm interested in exploring and sort of how you've balanced everything. So as usual, we'll start off with sort of how did you find financial planning as a career? I guess what led you down this path?
Well, I've always been in finance, in general. And after I got my MBA, I started working for a small, boutique investment management firm. And that kind of opened my eyes to broader comprehensive planning, which is what I ended up, wanting to do. So I left there after a couple of years and actually started a practice way back then, pre-XY. And I didn't really know many people in the industry, so I was kind of flying very blind. I also had a baby right around that time. So, I couldn't ever really focus enough, and I didn't have a lot of mentors. I had a few clients, but it wasn't ever really what I wanted it to be. And then eventually I got a great job at another boutique comprehensive planning firm that was really doing the kind of planning that I wanted. I was there for a couple of years, and then it was time to relaunch my practice. So, it was a whole new company by then. But yeah, so I did that a couple of years ago, and then that was when, I first contacted you. XY was getting started right around the same time. I was able to find out a lot about NAPFA because my prior employer, she was a NAPFA member. I became very knowledgeable. Well, I'm much more familiar with NAPFA, which I didn't really know that much about, and whether it was worthwhile to join and everything. And of course, you and I had a lot of conversations around that time. I was in kind of an unusual situation because I knew that I would be losing my job, but that it wouldn't happen for about 6 months. And that I was going to get a lot of support from my prior employer. She would have been very helpful with anything that I wanted to do, really. So, but I was able to do a lot of the legwork of setting up a new company while I was still working at my old one. So I didn't have to be as secretive as a lot of people are. So that was great. And you, of course, and Michael gave me a lot of guidance on what to do. And so I joined XY, I guess, in September of that year, finished working at my prior job on New Year's Eve. And then, from January, just kind of hit the ground running.
So many awesome things right there. I wanted to take a step back because there's some really interesting things that you said there. So first off, your first job was very much in, investment management. So you said you sort of got introduced to comprehensive financial planning. Is that Did you start like a CFP program at that time, or did you just sort of see, I guess, were they trying to do comprehensive financial planning or other firms were? I guess, how did you sort of see that side of the industry?
It was strictly investment management. And he wasn't really interested in doing much in the way of, cash flow planning or debt management or, insurance planning or anything like that. It was really just portfolio management. And, there were some good things and bad things about the job, but overall I learned a lot. But I did want to do something more broad. And that's when I started looking at the CFP program. So I started taking CFP classes at NYU at the School of Continuing and Professional Studies, where I've met a lot of people in the industry that I'm still in contact with now. And, it was too early for me to do this, but I decided to kind of venture out on my own. Yeah,
tell me about that. Because so what year would that have been?
That would have been 2007, right?
Okay.
With that.
So things were going well in the market for the next year. So tell me about that decision, because you sort of just discovered financial planning, getting into the CFP. Did you just feel like you had the contacts, or were you just not able to find a job that fit what you were looking for? So it was sort of your only option. I guess tell me about that process for you.
It was more about I didn't know where to even look for something like that. I mean, I was, I had come from finance, but I was still, I thought, quite new to the financial planning side of it. And, the jobs that I had looked for were all sales jobs, or the jobs that found me and that, that I could find were all sales jobs, essentially, which I definitely did not want to do. I'm a terrible salesperson. And, I was not going to be, contacting my friends and family to sell them insurance or anything like that.
Maybe we should define, when you say you're terrible at sales, you're probably terrible at cold calling sales. The success of your firm says you're good at sales, just a different kind of sales than we're used to in this industry.
Well, yeah. And, it was funny because the interviews that I had at all the companies that you can, I'm sure, guess at what they were all like, well, we had to cold call and we had to spend, 2 years doing it, and you're going to have to do it too. Like, well, hang on, maybe not. Let's see if there's another way to do this. So, I launched my firm, and I didn't have the procedures. I didn't have, I had good ideas, and I was able to get a few clients, and like they were happy with the work that I did, but like I didn't know what software I needed, and I didn't know, like how the procedure should look, and I didn't really know how to run a planning meeting in that sense. So, there was a lot of that kind of business person. Yeah, exactly. That, that I was just lacking.
So how long did you have that firm for?
For a couple of years, but, again, I had my son in the middle of all that. So that, took up a lot of my time. And, one thing I would say, if anyone is thinking about doing anything like this is, have the childcare question answered, whatever it's going to be, because I figured I thought I could wing it, which you most certainly cannot.
Yeah, I think there's an assumption that, kids sleep a lot, right? Like until they're like 6 months old, that's all they do. And you can just run your business on the side. And I hear that from a lot of folks that say like, oh yeah, I thought it was a good idea to try to work from home with the kid, and while you want, and you can spend a ton of time at home. I mean, you can work 20 hours a week, or you work 10 hours a week, or 40. That's a great point, that you do need to have it figured out how you're going to be in a different house or a different location for those hours.
It's not that you have to work full time or anything. You can work, you can structure it however you like, but you cannot assume that you're going to have that block of time available to you. It's probably not going to happen.
Yeah. And, when you're typing a client email and the child is crying, child wins. So that's just the reality. No, that's a great point, because I do think we preach the message a lot. And I think it's still true that this is a very flexible career path. And it is great for folks that want to be working parents or part-time working parents and be involved in a kid's life. But you do need to have that separation. It's very important. So you had that firm for a couple of years, and so then sort of found a job with a fee-only financial planning firm that was doing more of the financial planning that you want to be doing. So was it just sort of realization that there was a lot to learn there? Or, was it, I guess, more for financial reasons or maybe both to go ahead and shut down shop and take up take a job?
It was a little bit of both. I mean, it was kind of a friend of a friend put me in touch with someone who was looking to bring someone on part-time. So, she offered a lot of flexibility. It was a great environment, ton of stuff to learn. She ran her practice in a way that, really taught me a lot about how I wanted to run my practice. And it was the kind of planning that I wanted to do. I mean, it wasn't, not that there's anything necessarily wrong with this, but it's not as if it focused on high net worth or anything like that. Everything was very accessible. It was very flexible. She really developed very good relationships with her clients. And I was able to, learn a lot more about the technology that's available and what I would want and not want. And honestly, when I found out that I was going to be losing my job because she was moving the practice out of the city, I wouldn't have necessarily started a company. If I would have been fine, staying at that job. It was a good fit for me. I had good relationships with the clients. It was, my son was still young and it was a good flexible job. So it's not as if I was chomping at the bit to break out on my own right then and there. That's just kind of the way it happened.
Yeah. So she decided to move the practice, I'm assuming for her sort of own personal reasons. Was there not an opportunity, did y'all feel like, to work virtually, or that's just not how the firm was set up?
It really just wasn't how the firm was set up.
So how did you decide then? Obviously, this is a bit of a crossroads. Well, let me ask, how long were you at that firm for?
Almost 2 years.
Okay. So you're getting a lot of experience at that point. You've run your own firm. How did you make the decision between starting your own practice and sort of starting from the ground up versus going and getting a job, which, at that point, if you got your CFP and you've an MBA and, 4 to 5 years of experience, like you're a well-paid advisor in New York City. So I guess, how do you make that decision? Because I think that's a crossroads a lot of people face.
Yeah, well, the decision was, and I did look for other jobs, but I kind of knew that I wasn't really going to be able to strike gold twice in that respect with a job with flexibility. So it's not that it necessarily needed to be part-time, but the fact that I could be flexible with the hours, and like I sometimes needed to come in early and leave late, or switch days, or whatever it was, that was all fine. With my son was still pretty little at that point, so that was nice to have, especially because my husband doesn't really have the type of job where you can be particularly flexible. So it was nice, could still have that. So. And more importantly, doing the kind of planning that I wanted to do without some kind of a responsibility to be a rainmaker and to bring in clients. Partly because at my old job, I mean, we were kind of at capacity already, and like we were getting plenty of clients. So like no one felt the pressure to be like, oh, we need to go out and we need to get people in here. Like it was fine. So I did look around, but it didn't seem like there were any jobs that could really fit the bill in that way. And, at that point I had a few more contacts. I felt much more comfortable with, what would be needed to develop a company. And also, our son at that point was going to start kindergarten. So we didn't have daycare or, preschool to pay for anymore. We had just redone our basement. So I'm like, well, there's a space where I can work. And so, the stars kind of aligned and said, well, let's just do it. It's kind of now or never. And, I had a ton of support from my husband, and who said, just you do what you think is right for you. And, if anything, we'll revisit in a couple of years. But he just has been an endless source of support for me in all of this. And, it worked out very well from the beginning, especially again, with all the help that I got from all of you guys over at XY when I was setting up. That was a tremendous help as well.
You mentioned something interesting, which we probably need to do an entire episode on hiring and designing employee benefits, because this is something that we've been going through at XYPN as we continue to grow, is being sure our employee benefit matches our culture and our values. And so I've been doing a lot of research around this. And you mentioned having a flexible schedule. And people think this is just like for the lazy millennials out there that like they just don't want to work full time. But behind or after health insurance, a flexible work schedule or flex time is the number one requested employee benefit. We like to obsess about like having food in the fridge or having a cool office space, but like just giving people the flexibility to have a life. And it doesn't mean they don't work 40 hours a week, or it doesn't mean they don't work hard. It just means the ability to come in late, go home early, work from home when something happens or the kid is sick or whatever. Like just that is huge. So for any advisor out there that's looking at hiring, you can pay a lower salary if you will give flexibility. Actually, don't underpay, but it's a huge benefit to be able to offer.
It's very valuable, and like knowing that you can do that kind of thing and not put your job in jeopardy is really, really important.
Yeah, I mean, we have a team member that talks about, having to, basically like you better be at the desk from 9 to 5 and you get 1 hour for a lunch break. And there was just no questions asked. And if you walked in 15 minutes late, everyone noticed. And no one wants that lifestyle. And I understand that's sort of where work came from, but, that it was not in financial services. But anyway, so you make the decision to start your own firm. So this was when? When did you start this process?
This was the end of 2014, and then I officially launched the beginning of 2015.
Okay, so you were part of the first 50 members of XY Planning Network because we closed that year at 49.
Yeah, I don't think I was like the first wave. I joined in September of 2014. I joined in September, so there were there were a few members already. And there was a very lively, discussion group on the forums and all that. But yeah, I was in the, the winter launchers. I think the first winter launchers.
Yep. I think that was the first group we put together because we started having enough that it made sense to have a group. All right. So you launch your firm. Did you have sort of a target market in mind for the type of client you wanted to serve? Or were you a little more broad-based, just sort of see what would work for you?
I had an idea that I wanted to work with freelancers or people who at least had freelance income. And that has more or less turned out to be true. But I think that's just because it's just so common these days that at least like if you're talking about a couple, there's going to be some kind of, someone's going to be working for themselves or have a side hustle or something like that. So I think that's just kind of reality now. What it has actually turned out to be is that almost all of my clients are from Brooklyn, even though I didn't necessarily market that way, but that's who found me. So that's who I work with.
And are you in Brooklyn or are you in the city?
No, I'm in Brooklyn. I mean, I really work out of my home, and sometimes I meet clients here, but more likely I go where they are.
Okay. So yeah. So are you meeting at your home at all, or do you sort of have a place that you can meet with them if you're not going to their home?
Sometimes I'll get a conference room for a day or for half a day. More likely we're meeting at like a coffee shop or at their home, just so that they don't have to rearrange their schedules too much. I try to keep it as convenient for them as possible. And I just feel like people are more comfortable talking about this stuff in their own environment sometimes.
Yeah, talk to me about that, because I never did that, and partly probably just for selfish reasons of not wanting to have to travel. But, that's how advisors used to do a lot of that, and we've sort of gone away from it. So I guess, how is that different for you, being able to actually meet in their environment, their space?
It's, it's not something that I actively set out to do necessarily. It's just one of those things that's kind of how it worked out. But it turns out that I think it's much more convenient for them, especially if they have little kids, because then they don't have to worry about babysitters and they don't have to, I don't care if, there's like a baby running around or something like that while we're talking. And I think they appreciate that. Also if I kind of feel like if my clients were all concentrated in the same place, so they may all live, not all, but a lot of them live, say in Brooklyn, but they work maybe all over the city or all over the tri-state. So it's not as if I could really get office space that's convenient to everyone. It's always going to be a pain for people to get to wherever I choose, whether it's, Brooklyn or Midtown or the financial district or anything else. So, the challenge for me is to make sure that I schedule these things properly and I factor in things like travel time, but it does seem to work very well for them. And everyone is very they like the fact that I can work virtually, and they like that, I connect them with like e-money, and we can, we don't have to meet in person just to give documents to each other, things like that. So they like knowing that, they can just get on the phone or we can video chat, but they like just as much knowing that, oh, if they need to talk to me, like I'll just go to their house and we can just sit and talk over the table.
So we'll talk about how you've gotten here, but how many ongoing client relationships do you have now, just over 2.5 years in?
Ongoing client relationships, I have 10 at my last count.
Okay. So with those 10, do you feel like it's scalable when you go, and maybe this isn't even your intention, but if you go from 10 to 50 to 100 clients, like, is there a point at which traveling to the clients doesn't make sense anymore? Or are you able to charge sort of a premium fee in order to, facilitate having fewer relationships so you have that travel flexibility? Because you're spending a lot of time on the road, if that's the case. Yes.
And, I do try to schedule them all, say, like within one day, so that I'm not, the travel between the clients is minimized a little bit. This is something that I've been thinking a lot about is, what is my capacity and what is the, like what's my upper limit of these things. And, my study group and we've kind of been going through a lot of this stuff together as a group. And I also do a lot of project work, which I like just as much, maybe for different reasons, but I've been kind of trying to put some numbers around, what is my maximum limit of ongoing clients versus project clients. And, if I do shift more toward project clients, then does it make more sense to get office space and just say, well, this is where I'm going to be and everyone needs to come to me, and that's it.
Where are you currently leaning right now? Like, do you have any thoughts on sort of capacity given the current structure and what it would look like if you did sort of park yourself somewhere and the differences between those two?
I feel like I always shy away from getting to a point where I have to do anything really permanent, like hire someone, which feels very permanent to me, or getting office space, which also feels very permanent to me, which I know I'm going to have to do, right? But there's a certain part of my brain that keeps thinking of this as like, oh, I've just been very lucky so far, and this is not going to continue. And, I'm not going to do anything that would make it seem like I have to have like an ongoing commitment to a person, or I have to pay rent or something like that, because that's going to change the way I work with my clients. That is, that's my own problem, let's say. I am leaning toward, still having like kind of a 50-50 split, and understanding like this is the capacity that I truly have. Okay, and I should back up for a minute. I mean, I would say that I work full time, but I do work a very sort of fragmented schedule. So, I do kind of work my schedule around my son's. I am able to pick him up from school every day. So I really am working like at my desk from say 9 o'clock until like 2 or 2:30 every day. And then I stop, and then I'll pick it back up at night and, do some work on the weekends and things. But I would say until he's older and I can be somewhere from say like 9 o'clock to 5 o'clock or something throughout the day, and I don't have to stop what I'm doing to attend to like whatever he needs. I would prefer to maybe keep the number of ongoing clients lower and just take on project clients as I have capacity, and then revisit that whole question maybe say in 5 years.
That's an interesting delineation in that I don't think I've ever heard anyone make, and that is that project clients do provide more flexibility for you than an ongoing client. I don't guess I've ever thought of it in that way, but if you need more flexibility, being able to sort of schedule clients out and you can have less expectation around like we're going to meet at this specific time on this specific schedule every quarter, that if you need to back off for a little while, you can just sort of ramp down and ramp up based on how things are going.
Yeah. And there have definitely been weeks where, there was just a lot going on between the practice and, family obligations and the other thing that I know you're going to ask me about soon. And, other projects that we have, like, so we're renovating our upstairs apartment now, for example. There's always something going on.
You sound like you like to stay busy. So,
And I mean, there have definitely been times where I use Calendly. I look at my schedule. I'm like, nope, I am busy for the next 2 weeks. No, nothing new is happening, and just block out the time. And so, and no one has complained or anything like that so far. But I think you do need to be very proactive about, like, realistically speaking, what can I give, and not overcommitting.
no, that makes perfect sense. And the other thing that you mentioned, and I think it's important to note, just because I think a lot of advisors struggle with this. I struggle with this at XY Planning Network, where you're always in this, like, but what if it stops? But what if it ends?
Yeah, and I think that's just the way it goes for any kind of business owner.
It is. And I'll say that, like, I have made, and I don't mean to project this on you, I will just say from my experience, I have made mistakes by not hiring when I needed to, or not doing some things that I needed to, because I was afraid that it may stop. Because it's like, well, what happens if we don't get any new members this quarter? Well, suddenly the decisions that I made, like, I'm going to blow up the company if something bad happens. And it's like, is that really realistic? Like, what, anyway. So it is important to, and this is kind of an area where business coaching, I think, is so helpful, or having a study group to be able to sort of hold you accountable to say, all right, like, when was the last time you went a month or a quarter without a client? Like, it's probably going to continue. So talk to me a little bit about, sort of, as you got started and you were getting your firm started, what was your sort of plan around client service? Did you have this, like, project base in mind, or was it more, I'm going to work with everybody on an ongoing basis? Like, what did you think was going to happen?
Well, I offered both from the beginning, and I really left it up to the clients. And, we would have an introductory meeting, and we would talk through, what their circumstances were and how I could help. And then I would give them a proposal and say, if you prefer a project engagement where, we fill out all of the scope of services that we laid out, we will meet once or twice to, talk through the recommendations. I can help you with implementation. And then that's where it ends. This is how that would work. And if you prefer something ongoing, these are the details around that. And I really left it up to them. Most of the time, the clients just decide on their own. In a couple of cases, it was very, very clear what they needed. And I did, like, maybe guide them a little bit, but I really, kind of left it up to them and let them just, make whatever decision they thought was right for them and their families.
And I know a lot of advisors out there, and I sort of leaned this direction. I sort of fought my natural inclination on this, but we sometimes lean towards ongoing relationship is the best kind of planning and the only kind of planning. And I was just talking to another advisor that is going to be on the show, and she said she used to do project and just stop because she got tired of clients not implementing her recommendations. So I guess, do you sort of just see in the client meeting that, hey, this is just something that they need help today, and the ongoing relationship isn't valuable enough? Or is it more that when they're coming in, you're going, yeah, I just don't see them buying it, even though it would be valuable for them?
I think in a lot of my clients, and this might just be, what they, like, some self-selection going on or something like that, but they don't necessarily need ongoing assistance. They just need someone to help them organize everything and to help them, like, make the decisions, and then put everything in place, and then they're fine. And to me, it's like, you're still their advisor. If you help them, if you do all of this for them, and you explain, why you're recommending the things that you're recommending, and, maybe you keep in touch with them, however you keep in touch with them, through, like, a newsletter, or you send them a card, whatever it is, you're still their advisor. If they have a question later, they're still going to come to you, even though you're not collecting a monthly fee for them. They're still going to come to you and say, hey, that house that we talked about 2 years ago that, we would like to buy. Well, we're close to buying that now. Can we sit down again? So to me, the relationships on the ongoing side are deeper, but it's not as if I talk to my project clients, later after we finished everything up. I mean, more than half of them at this point, I would say, have come back to do some kind of follow-up work. So, I think you can still have that relationship with one-time clients. The reason I like it so much, I think, is because it keeps me on my toes as a planner. It keeps, it exposes you to new and different planning questions and challenges. Once, you have your slate of clients, I mean, not that, things can't happen, you kind of already know what their situations are. With the project ones, it's a new thing every day, and there's always something that keeps you on your toes with them. So I kind of like that it keeps me fresh in that way.
So how do you price the two services? I guess if I'm an initial client coming in, we do that initial meeting, and then you're looking at my situation. What are the pricing structures and sort of service model between the two offerings?
Yeah, I got away from calling it an hourly model and just call it a project. It works the same way. So I just, I figure out what they need. I give them an all-inclusive, like upfront price, just based on how long I think it'll take me to get through everything.
So it's sort of hourly, but flat fee. Like it's a flat fee based on anticipated hours.
Right. Okay. So, I bill $200 an hour, but again, I don't bill hourly. So, but I will build out my proposal based on, well, I think it's going to take me 10 hours. So this is a $2,000 project.
So what happens if it takes you 20? I mean, and obviously you're getting better at this, because I remember the first time I quoted a plan and it was like 15 hours and it took me 40. But like over time you get better, and you don't want to force your early clients to pay for that. But like, are you pretty good at quoting scope at this point, or do you ever have scope creep?
No, I'm pretty good at quoting scope, and I do give them like a bullet point on like, we're going to do this with cash flow, this with your investments, this with your insurance, and anything else that they that they want. And then if they, it hasn't really happened, but in my mind I would be very, very good at saying, if they said, oh well, now can you like help me decide which car to buy or something like that, I would give them a separate bill for that. That hasn't really happened. And I think, I also haven't been particularly diligent about tracking the exact number of hours that I spend on any one client. Also because sometimes I'll do two clients, not simultaneously, but if I have, two projects kind of going on at the same time and they're similar, I'll do both, say, cash flow projections at the same time. And I'll do both, just so I'm kind of doing all of that stuff all at once. I should have the numbers around this. I don't really track, like exactly how long it takes me versus how many hours I quoted up front.
Yeah, early on, it's not as important, but obviously as you grow and as you're hiring, those decisions make it easier, because if it takes you 10 hours to do something and your paraplanner 30, good to know. You'll probably be able to spot that. But so project-based, sort of hourly in your mind, but you're quoting it based on a flat fee. And then if they're coming back, are you also doing sort of flat fee projects a year later for, $200 if they need something, or do you flip to hourly at that point?
Yeah, I mean, it's still like a small project, I would call it. That's usually just a couple of hours. If, let's say, they think, oh, let's rebalance the portfolio that you set up, and look, oh, I've got new options in my 401k. Can we take a look at them? Or something like that, and let's just catch up and see whether our assumptions that we made a year or two ago were completely off the mark.
Gotcha. So then tell me about the ongoing sort of retainer planning. How is that structured? So
there's a fee-wise, there's $1,000 upfront fee for everyone, which I raised this year. It was $500, and now it's $1,000. And again, the ongoing, it's an annual planning fee that I charge monthly, and again that's based on complexity as well. I've toyed with the idea of making it more specific, something like net worth or income based or something like that where like there's a calculation. But so far I've only just, kind of decided, okay, like this is how many moving parts I've got to keep track of. And I just quote them an annual fee based on that. And then most people, just pay me either by check or credit card.
In sort of your first, so we're 2.5 years in, you've got 10 retainer clients. Any idea how many project-based clients you have worked with over that time period?
I'm going to say, since I launched, I'm going to say about 30.
Okay. So definitely heavier usage of the project.
Yes, and it's strange because for a while it was all just project clients, and then all of a sudden I got a lot of retainer clients, and then it swung back to project clients, and it's strange how that pendulum seems to, and I don't think I'm doing anything to influence it one way or the other, but maybe I am.
Just sort of who's coming in.
Mm-hmm.
So do you know, in going forward, I'm going to start asking guests to give you some of these questions beforehand. So I apologize to just be asking off the top of your head. But do you sort of know in your first sort of 1 year, 2 year around where expenses and revenue were, just for folks looking to get started, sort of an indication?
Yeah, I mean they were pretty low. I mean the first year was maybe a little bit higher because I did, I had some like startup expenses and things like that. But my overall annual expenses are around $15,000.
Okay. So 15,000 sort of your ongoing, and that would include your XY Planning Network membership.
Yes. XY Planning membership, eMoney, that is, those are the two larger expenses.
Those are two your bulk. Okay. And then any idea how, sort of what the extra startup costs were when you factor in, some of the compliance services, because we didn't even offer compliance services when you joined, website, that sort of thing.
Right. So I did the website, and I've since gone back and redone it myself. But I did the website. Registering my LLC in New York State was expensive, and that was kind of unexpected. But there's a weird little law in New York State where if you start an LLC in the state, you have to publish a notice, for one in like a daily newspaper and one in a weekly newspaper for a certain amount of time, just letting everyone know. And it's very strange because you get assigned the publications. You don't get to choose. Like I knew that this was happening. So I said, oh, I'll just go to like my local, like my super local newspaper, for the neighborhood. And I'll just put my notice in there and it'll be fine. But that's not the way it works. You get assigned one, a newspaper, like newspapers like no one's ever heard of. And you have to run these ads, and it costs like several $100s to do this.
Oh man, that just screams, how do we keep local papers in business?
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. Because no one, even if someone's reading the paper, no one is reading the ads. It's just like there's a page of like, oh, there's this company and this company that just started, and come on, like no one.
Funny. So then do you have a sense for where sort of revenue was relative to expenses in those first 2 years and how it's sort of growing?
Well, this actually brings me to a pretty interesting anecdote, which I'm glad you reminded me because I wanted to bring it up. I was not expecting revenue to be particularly high in the first year, but there was a New York Times article that ran in April of that year, and I got a lot of clients from that, and it mentioned XY. And I remember it was in the Sunday. It was in the Sunday Times in the business section. It was a Ron Lieber article, and it mentioned XY. And I was on vacation that week, and I mean my firm was a couple of months old, and I think I had worked with a couple of clients already. So I left my calendar open, but not thinking that anything was going to happen. So I was down in North Carolina on vacation, and all of a sudden, I had meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting scheduled. I'm like, what's going on? Because I hadn't even read the paper at that point. And everyone in the notes said, oh, we found you through XY and we read about it in the paper. So, we would really like to do something like this. So I got several clients from that.
Oh, too funny.
Yeah. So it actually, I mean, my first year expenses were actually covered from the revenue that I got from, the clients coming from that article.
Yeah, that's amazing. I remember Ron was very kind. It was an article about, I think, the LearnVest sale to Northwestern Mutual and some of the concerns around being fiduciary and all that, if I'm remembering correctly. And so it was on the front page.
It was on the front page. It was very prominent. It was very and it's not as if I got mentioned by name or anything like that, but just the XY mention. And, and again, really so many of my clients are local that it really was all New Yorkers who, went and said, oh, let me see what this is all about. And there you go.
And if I remember correctly, you were our only New York member at that time. So I think you got like 98% of the benefit of that mention. So then I guess how has sort of that sort of helped and that's just an amazing sort of pop unexpectedly to sort of cover expenses. And then how has revenue been sort of since then?
It's been growing every year. My expenses are pretty low, but it's going to say it's more or less doubled every year. I mean, this is only the third year. So, but I would say, yeah, it's about doubled every year. And I guess I'm on pace to do that too. And I haven't really grown my expenses, which is, again, kind of brings me back to, what we were talking about before. Like, do I really need to grow my expenses? Everything's kind of going well, and I don't really, if I can serve the number of clients that I want to serve without having to change the structure of my business, is that what I want to do? Or do I want to think more like, well, I do want to change the structure of my firm, and I do want to make it more concrete and to have numbers that need to be met and all that. My big concern is that, I still feel like I have some capacity to take on like the small projects, the people who really are just starting out and they don't have a ton of assets or income, but they really want to make good decisions. They want to put good habits in place. I don't want to turn those people away. And, in some cases, there is no work for me to do. So it's not even a matter of like, working with them at all. But I do, one of the things that I would like to do is create some kind of a freebie or something that I can give to people and that isn't going to take me a ton of time, but they feel like they got something out of it. And because if this is their first experience with the industry and their first experience with a planner, like I want it to be a good one. Even if I'm not eventually going to be their planner, I don't want them to feel like they're just turned away and like, oh, like, come back when you have more, because they're not going to get more unless they have some help, So I do want to come up with a way that I can still work with people in a situation like that, either, like new graduates who are just, who really like have their first job and like, what do they do about the 401k and all that. And, then there are also like some other people who maybe have like a little bit more of a need, but they wouldn't really be a full client either, so I'm talking like, like $500, $600 projects. If I do something like, get office space, hire someone or whatever, I want to make sure that I'm still able to do a couple of those like every few months or every year or something like that.
So is it fair to say that you're sort of at a crossroads, not just on should you hire, should you get office space, but really on what you want the company to look like? Because obviously it's very different that if you make the decision to stay solo versus growing it, like, is that sort of where the tear is in terms of what you were trying to build?
Every day I feel like I'm leaning in a different direction. There's so much to like about the way I'm structured now, but at the same time, is that well of clients eventually going to run dry? And, the fact that I don't have a physical presence somewhere, or I don't have, something like that, is that going to hold me back?
It's a tough decision, and I commend you for making the decision. Listeners have heard me say this before, but I think a lot of us do things that sort of make the decision for us without actually being conscious about it. And then, and that's how you end up, building a quote unquote successful business that you hate. Is, suddenly you have 3 employees and you have an office space and all of this, and you're thinking like, wow, I really just want to work from home. And it's tough to go back on. So it'll be interesting to see sort of how you make that decision and what the decision is, and 2, sort of how it gets made and the direction you want to move. So I guess for listeners' benefit, you've had success. It's been it sounds like a consistent build. What would you say have been some of your, I guess, the biggest strengths or the things that you've done right that you're glad you did? Like anything sort of stand out as, I did that thing correctly, and I would do it again if I had the opportunity.
Well, I don't know if this is what you meant, but I've had a couple of clients now, or maybe even like a half dozen, come back to me and say that after talking to me, they went in and talked to their HR about their 401k options, ended up getting better ones because, in all the cases, like, oh, now they've got the Vanguard Institutional share class and things like that, where before they didn't have anything even similar. And all I did was explain to them, hey, if you could maybe put a little bit of pressure on your managers or your HR department and just say, hey, we really need some like better, lower cost, options here. I bet they would listen. And sure enough, like it has worked. And, that is going to save the employees, thousands of dollars. Cause, I do work with younger clients. So, when you're talking about a time horizon like that, I mean, that's a lot of money that's going to stay in their pocket.
Could be 1% on the expense ratio side.
That's always nice because that always feels like it's something that is so simple and it puts so much more power, they feel like they have so much more power over their situation than they did before. One of the reasons that I love this is that it gives you the ability to, clear a lot of confusion and, really make people understand that no, like they got the knowledge, they've got the ability to understand all of this stuff. One thing that I really want my client, that I make a priority with all of my clients is to make sure they understand what I'm telling them. They're not just doing it because I'm telling them to do it, that they get, the reasoning behind everything. And I try to take the time to explain why we're recommending a particular strategy, why something that they thought, might work for them turns out that it's not going to work for them. Because I feel like this industry is, there's a lot of guilt around money and there's a lot of guilt around your finances, especially, women, I think especially feel this. Everyone feels like it's not just necessarily guilt around spending, but they feel like they should be financial experts. Like they should be able to just do all of this stuff on their own. And it's not. And, it's complicated. It has gotten a lot more complicated over the past, couple of generations. And, you would never fault someone. I mean, I don't cut my own hair, right? I don't perform dentistry on myself. I don't feel bad about that. And no one else does either. But people feel very bad that they can't do these things on their own. And there's really, there's no reason to feel that way. There are people who will help you. And, just like a dentist or a hairdresser, I mean, I don't show up to them like never having done any maintenance. Like it's a partnership. If they're going to do their job right, I have to do mine.
That's such a great framing. I like that, you still have to brush your teeth every day, but you still.
Yeah. I mean, they can't fix everything, but, there is, you go to a professional for a reason. That's, and it needs to be a partnership. So that's how I try to frame these things for them.
Makes sense. So on the flip side of that, have you any major trip ups or stumbles or mistakes that you feel like you've made that you could share to help other folks avoid them?
Well, hopefully this didn't necessarily come through on the client side so much, but I'm the worst procrastinator and I will wait until the last minute. I will be writing that plan the night before I meet with the client. And it's something that I recognize and I need to get better at it. So one thing I do, I will schedule a meeting. I'll make sure, once I have everything, I'll put a meeting on the calendar so that I can't keep pushing it off. And it'll force me to do it. But it has caused a lot more stress than I necessarily needed to experience. And I probably, had I not done that to myself, I probably could have, I would have done a better job necessarily, but I probably could have thought through a couple of other things that I, maybe thought about later. I'm like, oh, they could also do this. So let me call them back. But I think if I had just, taken a little more time to, to do everything, in a less stressful environment.
Yeah, no, I totally respect that. As listeners know, I'm a procrastinator myself. And so I don't think about individual tasks like a month out like some people do. I don't know. I think about it like the day before it's due and just sort of handle it. But life happens and it pops up and, that's the day the kid is sick or you get a last minute meeting or the emergency happens or whatnot. But So with our last little bit, I do want to switch gears and talk about your other project.
My other big project. Yeah.
Yes. So while you are not busy at all running your financial planning firm and having a little one, you decided to open a bar. So tell me about this project.
Well, it's slightly different than that. I didn't open the bar. The bar was already open. It was 5 years old, and my husband and I and some other friends bought in to this established bar, which was conveniently located, 2 blocks from my house. And yeah, so, we were patrons there, of course, and, became close with the owner and the owner's family. And, there was an opportunity to become investors and to be a part of the business. So that is, I would say, our side job, but, sometimes it feels more like our job.
So what is yours and your husband's role there? Are y'all like literally managing the company, or you just, I guess, what all are you doing there?
I took over the books. So I do all of that stuff. I do all the boring stuff. I pay the bills and I make sure that, the money goes to the bank, and, I run payroll and things like that, which is interesting because I don't do that for my own practice, but it was kind of a natural fit. So I took over all of that, and I am, applying a lot of the same practices that I use with my clients to the bar, as far as like shorter term cash flow projections, and like trying to figure out just doing some scenario planning, what if we do this and what if we do that? And so my husband has an HR background, so he has kind of taken over the whole staffing and like legal side of everything. The partner who did open the bar, he is the one with the industry knowledge. So he's the really the day-to-day face of the bar. And then our other 2 friends also bought in with us, and they have he especially has a digital marketing background. So he took over the marketing and promotion side of it. And she is doing that as well. So she's doing all the social media, and we're really coming together with a more coherent marketing strategy and vision for the bar.
That's so awesome. So I guess, how has that been going? And it sounds like you got a cool group of well-rounded experience. So it sounds like it works well together.
Yeah, well, my husband and I met in graduate school, and our other friend who is our partner, we also all became friends in graduate school. So it's funny because, we kind of think of this as like, oh, this is just one of our MBA projects, and we'll just apply all of this like MBA knowledge to this, and, we'll come out with like catchphrases that like our professors would use or something like that. Like we keep telling everyone, whenever someone has an idea that isn't going to, be profitable or something like that, we're like, you're talking about a hobby, not a business, which is like I think it was like the very first day of graduate school. This one professor that we had who, was hilarious, but, he's like, that's not a business. That's a hobby. If you're not making money, that's a hobby, what you've just described. So we never let anyone forget that. But it's interesting in a way. It's completely different, really, than the practice, right? Because it's much more tangible and physical. And I don't have any kind of a background in hospitality. I was never a bartender or a waitress or anything like that. So I'm kind of flying blind on that side. I've been behind the bar a couple of times, like just to fill in, but that's not really my thing. But, I have learned a lot about the industry, and I learned a lot about wine, really, and beer, because it's a wine bar. And we have beers, and we also have like some small plates. Don't have a full kitchen, but we have some like snacks and things like that. And, this neighborhood has a ton of bars, but they tend to be sports bars, Irish pubs, things like that. And they're great, but that's kind of been done. So, this is a very different sort of place. We don't even have a TV in the space. It's quiet. There's some music playing, but, you can certainly have a conversation. It's not a place where you to go and get drunk with your friends, which was actually a comment on a Yelp or Facebook that someone lodged a complaint. Like, well, this is not a place where you can go and get drunk.
You're like, thank you. That was great. That was a great, thank you for the compliment.
That is what we're going for. You're not going to worry about like anyone like sloshing their drink into you or anything like that. Like we have a very kind of esoteric sort of wine list. They're different things than you would get certainly in this neighborhood, which is a challenge because, you know, it's not cheap. The things that we sell they're not, you know, inexpensive. So there's a lot of education that needs to happen. And we're very willing to, the staff is very, very willing to talk about, you know, the differences between one thing and another, guide you toward, you know, what you might like. But it's funny because there's a similarity here, right? Between financial planning and wine, sort of. Not so much beer, but more wine, where people feel afraid of wine and they feel like, you know, I don't want to look dumb and I don't want to ask a dumb question. So I'm just not going to do it. And so we are trying to overcome that before anyone even gets to our bar. We try to be very welcoming and we try to be very approachable, and we're, you know, coming up with new ideas on like answering the questions that people might have, even if they don't want to voice them.
Yeah, so I am this way with wine. I have no palate for it. And I remember we did like a wine club membership because that was our, you know, way of doing it at home without having to ask questions. And on the little descriptor card, the one I'll never forget is notes of forest floor. And I remember thinking like, so this tastes like dirt? Like, is this really this is what you came up with? But no, it's so cool. Cause, and like you said, you're sort of, well, I guess the way I would describe what you're saying is you actually have a niche, you have a focus, you know, and that's what differentiates you from everywhere else. And so can you give us the name of the bar so anyone that's ever in town can stop in?
Yeah, it's the Owl's Head in the Owl's Head. There's a park here called Owl's Head Park. So, and there's a big owl motif in the bar. People keep giving us owls, and we keep displaying them.
So, that's in Brooklyn? Yes,
it's in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, and it's a very, you know, sort of warm, small, intimate place. Great place for a date, or, you know, just to, you know, come with your friends and have a nice night out. We actually, my partner, the founding partner, is an artist as well. So we have a pretty strong relationship with local artists, and we just redid the mural outside. Art school classmate of his redid it for us, and it looks fabulous. It really drew on the theme, like the sort of, I think he called it like the woodsy hospitality of the bar, made it where there are a lot of like sort of woodland creatures, but you really need to spend a lot of time and like looking at all of the different details to see like just how many different things there are. And there's, you know, there's also like a lot of food and drink motifs in there. Like I think someone has a cleaver, or there's like someone tapping a keg or something like that. So there's a lot of like really cool things to see.
So for folks that are in the Brooklyn area, stop in the Owl's Head and say hi. So as we're sort of coming to a close, I'll ask you the final question, being if there's sort of one thing that you wish you had known, maybe that you could go back and tell the Cristina that's thinking about launching a firm or taking on a side project, i.e. running a bar or something along those lines, I guess, what would that one piece of advice be?
I think it would be to like not be so afraid of things. I mean, I've raised my prices quite a bit, and I should have done that a long time ago. So don't be afraid of the value that you bring, and don't be afraid to stand up for, you know, what you know you are worth.
I love it. And I think that's become more of a focus of our coaching team, is how to get folks to implement higher prices at the beginning, because that it's got to be the number one thing I think that planners do after their first year. They're like, I am way undercharging.
Well, I think I haven't gone far enough because I haven't gotten any pushback on my pricing. So I guess I haven't really reached the squeal point yet. I should make them higher.
I'll never forget the advice Cheryl Garrett gave me when I was starting my practice was, you know, when I was pure hourly, and it was when you need to be a little uncomfortable giving someone your price. Like, and if you're like, when $180 an hour rolls off the tongue, go to 200. And when 200 just rolls off and you're just so confident you can't imagine a world where someone would push back, raise it a little bit. Because there comes a point where you feel like, all right, this is good. Like, you'll know when you hit that line. And I thought it was great advice. I I did the same thing. So, well, Cristina, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show and giving up some time on your weekend to be able to be on. I really appreciate it.
I really, really appreciate the opportunity. It was great to talk.
Be sure to join our VIP community at xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP to hang out with other XYPN radio listeners, ask questions for future mailbag episodes with myself and Kitsis, and to finally find a community of like-minded financial advisors. Thanks so much for joining me today. We'll see you next time.
You're not alone, and you're not crazy. It's scary starting, building, and growing your own financial planning firm. And that's why we put together a free private community just for you, the Cutting Edge Financial Planner. Go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP or text XYPN Radio to 33344 and join a network of thousands ready to change the lives of Gen X and Gen Y clients.